Honorable Judge, in the status quo, students are unfortunately being discouraged by the concept of direct grades. Even going further, schools are not fulfilling the actual purpose of learning and assessing students by giving grades. After all, the purpose of learning and assessing is supposed to give students the opportunity for self-improvement and to teach students the concepts that they do not understand. But how is it possible that this can happen when students find themselves receiving a single grade under assessments instead of constructive feedback that shows them their strengths, weaknesses, and areas of improvement? Therefore, the government believes that schools should ban grades and replace them with written feedback. In this debate, the main burden of the government is to prove these things, which system of feedback will help students learn better, and why is the abolishment of grades necessary to educate students in an effective way. For the government to win this debate, we need to show the harms in the current grading system and why written feedback will not go through these problems, while the opposition needs to prove why our harms in the current grading systems are beneficial. Now I'll move on to my team's arguments. The government has two arguments to support our case. One, grades show obedience, not understanding. Often it can be seen that grades merely show students how to follow instructions, which include completing the homework at the deadline, following the exact instructions of the teachers and projects, or giving the expected answers on assessments. Following these protocols will often give students good grades such as an A or a B, but will not ensure that students fully understand the subject. Even going further, the students who actually show an effort to achieve deep understanding in the subject will often get lower grades for not following the expectations. If this process continues to occur, students who are trying to develop a deep understanding will be discouraged, and eventually they will have to follow the instructions of the teacher to receive good grades. This causes a long-term deterrence in the learning process of the students, especially when they reach a certain level of education where they cannot merely follow the instructions of the teacher to do well in tests. But with written feedback, the same problem will not be happening. This is because written feedback will not discourage students to follow the standard instructions of assessments, but allow them to exercise their deep understanding. This argument is important because it shows that grades simply cannot allow students to exercise their deep understanding in subjects. The second argument for the government is that one grade cannot show a student's full potential. Oftentimes, a grade is a system designed to summarize a student's performance in one word. This can be seen as that when a student receives an A in their assignment, and they often receive recognition from the teachers or their peers. Meanwhile, the grade of F causes people to automatically assume the limited abilities of a certain student. But the labeling of society is often harmful and unfair, as there might be students who show a deep understanding in a certain topic, but do not well in tests because they are, for example, anxious in tests. So a grade does not automatically show a student's full potential, nor does it reflect their accurate performance. But written feedback is different. It can give students an accurate idea of their strengths and what they need to improve. This method of assessing will give a more complete and full understanding of the student's ability than one single grade can do, both to the teachers and the student themselves. This argument is important because it shows that only written feedback can show the full picture of the learning process of these students. In conclusion, we have mentioned two arguments to support our case today. One being grades cannot show obedience, not understanding, and the second being that one grade simply cannot summarize a student's full potential. Therefore, we are proud to propose.
What? Panel's grades have been around for such a long time, and for a side proposition to want to ban it out of the blue and completely replace it with written feedback just won't work. So proud to oppose. So then some framing first then. So first, what do we mean by teacher explaining what the students can improve on when they give written feedback? It looks like long-winded, detailed paragraphs or sentences about the student's overall work that are often unclear as they don't give an exact metric or score that the student can determine their performance based off. And second, our stance then. We truly don't think that there should be a complete ban on grades and replace them with written feedback. We opt for a balance. Students will receive grades like A, B, C, and etc. But if they want to get personal feedback, then they need to directly ask the teacher. And note that this feedback will still be as detailed as we framed it. It's just that it's not used for grading purposes, but rather for what you can reflect on and improve by. So the burden of proof in this debate is for side proposition is how written feedback would be effective or even possible, and on our side, why banning grades simply won't work and a balance is more efficient and practical. So some rebuttals then. First, side proposition said that schools are not fulfilling the the true purpose of education through grades. And we completely disagree with the statement, panels. Grades have been around for such a long time, and if it really does not help with improvement for students, then why would it still exist, right? So that's why we tell you that grades actually do fulfill the true purpose of education through grades. And second, side proposition also said that grades merely show students to follow instructions and does not fully allow students to understand the subject. And panels, we tell you that this statement is just misleading. Grades don't simply show who can follow instructions. They measure how well students actually understand and apply what they've learned, right? To earn a good grade, students must demonstrate knowledge, critical thinking, and effort, not just like memorization. And in fact, grades do help
Um,
identify which students have mastered the topic and which ones need more support. And yes, I'll take that POI.
how are you going to respond to our point that teachers often reward higher grades to students for just following their instructions?
Right. So panels, there are two different things, right? What we're talking about here is grades that we can correlate to like test homeworks and daily class assessments. But there's also a specific category for daily assessments which the teachers can give a separate grade for, right? And like we tell you that these grades actually do matter because if they want to get a higher grade, right? That's what students want. And for them to get a high grade, especially in daily class assessments, then they have to participate in class, which makes them like participate in class, and also in the end it's better for them. Now moving on to my two arguments then. First about clear measurement and comparison, and second about motivation. First argument then. Grades provide a clear way to measure and compare student performance. It doesn't have to be so long, but it's enough for students to understand what they did wrong and what they can improve on. So first layer of analysis then, on how are grades a good way for student performance. It's a simple and easy way for students to spot their mistakes and also shows them how well they've mastered a certain topic. This helps both the students and teachers track the students' progress and target on specific things they can improve on. Second layer then, on how this compares to written feedback. With written feedback, sure, it's great. However, the sheer amount of work that teachers would have to do to achieve this for every single student makes it impossible to keep it consistent and accurate. And my DLO will also be elaborating further on this. Whereas with a grade-like format, students can actually understand and track their progress, where students can see that they're improving or declining, and teachers could actually stay consistent as well as not be overworked. And next, on motivation then. Panels, grades have been around for such a long time, like we've told you. And we tell you that the reason it still exists is because it truly is effective and it does motivate the student. So grades give students a healthy sense of competition between each other. And when they see their results that may be lower than that of others, they will naturally want to do better. And the second layer then, on how this can apply in their future. Grades can also teach students discipline and responsibility, right? Especially in the status quo where people are constantly evaluated, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's always written feedback. And moreover, grades are straightforward and it gives students the opportunity to easily spot what they can improve on. So for all those reasons, then you must vote for side opposition. Thank you.
Honorable Judge, while the current society supports a world where there are grades, we strongly oppose this. We believe that giving out written feedback can help reveal the hidden potential of students. Overall, the goal of the debate is on helping the child grow and improve in various ways. I'll continue to prove how giving written feedback is much more likely to show students' true potential. The main goal I want to achieve in my speech is that even if we don't give out grades, there are better ways for the students to improve and get motivated. Before I elaborate on my arguments, I will first rebut the leader of the opposition. She has stated that feedback is unclear. However, we have shown how grades are much more vague than feedbacks. Feedbacks give the areas of improvement to the student. However, the grades only shows the student's ability in A, B, C, D, or F. She has also stated that it is enough to know the
POI.
grades are. I accept it.
How can you tackle the risk of teachers not being able to keep consistency in writing their written feedback, especially in classrooms where there are too many students for one teacher?
The teachers, like even if they don't give out grades to the students, they can give out short feedbacks to the students. That will also be able to help the students more than just simply grades that goes like A, that goes in one alphabet. Going on to my rebuttals, she has stated that the grades give competition. However, it worsens the students' mental health because the grades where they are too big of a difference can make them feel smaller than others. And people also judge the students simply by their grades. I'll go on to my first. Oh, I'll go on to my yeah.
How can you truly ensure motivation is through only written feedback?
If they have a grade and one student gets an A and another gets an F, then that student, it varies by personality, but the people most judge the students simply by their grades. So that's why the students who get F will listen to the parents saying that they have to improve. My argument is that giving written I'll reject it. My argument is that giving written feedback helps sustain the student's mental health. Grades only show how well a student completed their task, not the improvements they can make. Once they have a failed grade on one subject, they only look at the bad parts. For example, when a student gets an A on their grade, people congratulate them. On the other hand, for students who got an F, they tell them to study harder. That's the problem of the grade system, Judge. Even though the student might have done well in some parts, the grades only show the overall results. However, when the teacher writes feedback for the students instead of grades, it helps them see their weaknesses and problems together. This overall leads to stronger mental health of the student because they can still get motivation to improve. The opposition might claim that grades give a goal for the students to work better and give better motivation and incentives. However, these types of incentive only tell the students to work harder and doesn't tell where to improve clearly. Think about the coaches in the debate class. They give consistent feedback, not just grade them. They do that because they know that after their feedback, students will think about it and use it in the future. The significant difference between grades and written feedback is that written feedback is much more extended and elaborated. It gives consistent and motivational feedback, whereas the grade systems let people judge the student's ability. The problem with this judgment is that they do not see the true potential of the students, as the Prime Minister has already shown. Judge, the goal of a school should be focused on letting the child grow in their own ways, not just following others to get a better grade. That's why I'm proud to propose.
Panels, grades were literally invented for effectiveness and stability. This may not be the best metric for student growth, but it becomes crucial in our status quo where there's a teacher decline and classrooms are overflowing. We need an effective, easy, and stable metric for teachers to not get overworked and for them to keep consistency and stability. But before moving on to my points, I'll go on to my rebuttals. They talked about how students who are trying to get a deep understanding will be discouraged, and written feedback encourages them as it gives them an accurate list of their strengths and weaknesses. Judge, we tell you that we tell you that the discouraging of having deep understanding does not depend on the way they are graded. We tell you this discouragement comes from the lack of quality teaching or the way that the teacher teaches in itself. It can also depend on what the students' own interests are themselves. It's unfair to blame it all on the grading system. We tell you that written feedback could also literally pose these risks, as it can stem this discouragement from less clarity or less understanding of the written feedback. However, then they also talked about how grades reward higher students who just fit in the perfect frame. But panels, we tell you they don't just grade based off of favoritism. Most of them don't. And they literally grade off of answer keys and years of experience and teaching. This metric is at least a lot more stable and consistent than written feedback that has many risks to be inconsistent. We'll further elaborate by extension. Yes, I'll be taking that POI.
As your LO stated, the system of grading encourages competition between students. But like, if they do not have the capability to participate in this competition, won't they be systemically excluded from the academic society of the schools?
We tell you that not everyone looks at it as a competition, but the ones that want to compare and who wants to achieve more and wants to have a clear target could participate in this competition with this stable metric and can only be provided with our stable metric under our side, right? But now let me move on to my extension, where grades allow efficiency, consistency, and complete understanding. Judge, the first thing we must truly note and remember is that teachers are not perfect robot machines that could finish the task perfectly and on time and track every student's progress. Sure, this model of written progress could work in a 10-student classroom, but on the realistic note, in the teacher decline crisis of our status quo, where classrooms are literally growing bigger, banning grades literally becomes unrealistic and too extreme. They have not given us enough metrics and enough whys as to why you really need to ban the grades. Why is it so bad that you need to ban it? We tell you that yes, written feedback is great and all. However, banning grades and completely replacing them with customized written feedback for every student would triple the workload, and this becomes a crazy amount of work for teachers in the public or bigger schools out there with less teachers and more students, where teachers literally will not be able to grade well and consistently because of the sheer amount of work. So then what would happen under their side where they decide to ban grades? Majority of schools and teachers will become overworked and burnt out. This becomes a huge risk and a huge negativity under their side, because with the sheer amount of work that there will be to do. So this means that there's a huge risk of confusing one student's feedback with another's, or giving similar feedback to every student, and teachers losing the consistency that is essential for a system like this to actually work and for the student growth that they claim is so important and so essential under their side. We tell you all of their points are unrealistic and will not work in most of the schools. Whereas under our side, we actually let the teachers give graded results, which allows for consistency, accuracy, and most importantly, clarity, where students can actually understand and track their own efforts. And since under our side, we won't ban anything, students still have the flexibility to go to the teachers and ask them for personal feedback if they feel like it is necessary, if they feel like they want it. We tell you that this model is a lot better than Proposition's model of overworked teachers and inconsistent results with students that will not understand the feedback. For all of these reasons, I strongly oppose it.
Honorable judges, adjudicators, and fellow debaters. As the government whip speaker, I'll explain why our team wants to debate. I'll start with my clashes. For my first clash, side opposition explained how grades have clear ways to measure and compare students' performance. However, this is wrong because without clear feedback, the students can't know which part they were weak at, what they were good at, and how and where they should improve. The opposition talked about how students can ask teachers to give private feedbacks. However, in reality, teachers won't be able to give multiple students private feedbacks and also grades because it would be a huge burden for the teachers. They would obviously have to look through the students' performance very accurately with effort in order to give them a proper grade. Or in order to give them a proper grade. And so it is proof that both feedbacks and grades require the teacher's attention and effort. However, if the government replaces grades with feedbacks, the students it will be more easy for the students to know which part they should improve, which part they are weak, and which part they are good at. For my second clash, side opposition also explained how banning grades would triple the work and give more work to the teachers. Our side agrees with this argument, but firstly, it seems like side opposition misunderstood because in order to grade, the teachers obviously have a similar amount to work when they're also giving feedbacks. Sure, feedbacks require more time than just giving normal grades. However, feedbacks are just an extended version of grades, and also grades also require the teacher's attention because the teacher has to give students a proper grade. Meanwhile, while giving normal grades doesn't show the student about which part they were weak, again, like which part they were weak and which part they should improve and which part they were good at. Grades don't feedback.
why?
No, thank you. Feedbacks give information and advices for the students on parts where they should improve, which part they are weak, which part they are good at. Because because feedback shows students the parts they are positive and negative at. It proves that feedbacks are better than grades to students. Thank you for because of these reasons, the government team wins the debate. Thank you for listening.
You grade students based on quote unquote personal feedback given from teachers and call it fair and efficient education. You create blurry lines and unclear classroom dynamics and call it equality and education equity. Panels, I don't think that there's a need or urgency to ban grades and replace them with feedback. Rather, we should opt for a balance because replacing such a universally agreed term, an old term, just causes more chaos and inefficiency. Proud to oppose. Moving on to my first clash then, which is side proposition's most contingent and most repeated argument about how teachers are supposed to make students improve and understand what they got wrong in. And that doesn't happen in grades and only happen in feedback. Few responses then. Firstly, I don't think that grades will survive this long for centuries if it had not served the purpose for education in the first place. Sure, it doesn't cover like the whole topic and give students the exact reason on like why they scored this mark and long-winded sentences on what they got wrong and what they can improve on, but it offers clarity and comparison that lets students understand what exactly their goal is, maybe an A star or even a 90%. On side proposition, those kinds of metrics simply don't apply and do not exist, and students barely know where to go through. Secondly, then, even if side prop is contingent and still pushes for on how written feedback makes the students understand better, I don't think it's that easy to make the change in the first place. Notice how from the very get-go, when you want to ban something so universally agreed upon and at least accepted, you have to at least somehow convince billions of people that grades should be banned and replaced by written feedback. And I don't think that it's going to be that realistic. And there have never been like a worldwide protest on banning grades. You cannot just say ban grades and they'll be replaced by written feedback. We tell you that side prop never gave an exact metric or even a structure on how to ban it and replace it. So I don't see like a realistic approach on this unless side prop unless side prop can find a way to prove this. Thirdly, even in our worst case scenario, which is that side prop keeps pushing for how written feedback gives more improvement for students, why do we still win then? Notice how grades are chosen for a reason. They offer clarity, impact, and purpose, and they offer long-term and sustainable efficiency in the sense that it doesn't require hundreds of hours to mark a student's paper. Exams like the Chinese college entrance exam, the Gaokao, it's simply unrealistic to persuade the teachers to mark every 13 million students each year in a long, detailed sentence of written feedback. We don't think that is realistic at all. Secondly, then, and if a student gets a bad grade like a C or a D, their mental health will worsen. Judge, instead, we should reframe this to tell you that a stable metric like grades will allow for more stable comparisons and stable targets that's essential for the student themselves. Worsening mental health stems from toxicity of students themselves that are present on both sides of this debate, whether it's students making fun of us, whether it is students making fun of others with more weaknesses or improvements, and the risk of toxicity is like always present and symmetrical in debate. A very brief final weighing then. On side prop, you give more detailed and long-winded feedback, and secondly, more time taken to grade students on, while on our side, we give more grading clarity that students can easily reflect upon and compare with other students, and secondly, efficient grading time management and consistency. So why do we win this debate then? First, practical. We offer more long-term sustainability because of this inherent pattern that grades have existed as a standardized test metric throughout history, so there's no large-scale problem that is worldwide known enough or impacted enough people to the point where protests rise and schools shut down, and secondly, efficiency, because written feedback takes such a long time that it takes practically only works efficiently under certain circumstances, like for example, a really small class. So it doesn't work for big exams like the Chinese Gaokao college entrance exam, because it will be ridiculous for teachers to write a detailed and structured sentences or paragraphs for almost 15 million students annually. On the basis of education equity, efficiency, and sustainability, we are so proud to oppose. Thank you.
Side proposition lost this debate the moment they tell you, panels, that despite having existed for a long time, grades are just not effective and should completely be banned and replaced. So proud to oppose. So let's let's tell you like a studying mistakes side proposition has made then. To answer our POI, side proposition gave a really vague answer, and they clearly did not even understand our question when we asked them how they can truly ensure motivation on their side. This is because throughout the whole debate panels, they never exactly told us how on their side when feedback can actually replace grades, especially in terms of motivation and etc. So moving on then. So they first told you that grades don't fulfill the true purpose of education and only make students follow instructions. But this is not enough because we disagree with that proposition because grades have existed for so long because they clearly measure progress and improvement, right? Proving that they do fulfill the true purpose of education. They don't just make students follow instructions, they actually do show real understanding and critical thinking. And grades also help students know where they stand and what to work on. And next, we posit that grades give clear comparison and measurement as well as true motivation. And their response to this was that without clear feedback, they wouldn't know what to improve on. And with written feedback also gives them an accurate list, and grades also worsen mental health. But why do we win this clash then? Panels, we win this clash because grades provide what written feedback alone cannot. Side proposition claims that written feedback helps students improve, but without grades, there is no clear standard to measure progress. And so, at the end of this day, we win this debate because we offer a more realistic approach that has been explained by third opposition, and we also give more incentive, motivation, and dedication for students to reach for the moon as we offer more clear measurements and comparison explained by second opposition. And adding to that, they have not given us enough mechanism or even enough reasoning as why we need to go so far as to actually ban grades. So for all those reasons, then you must vote for side opposition. Thank you.
Honorable Judge, the opposition's world is simple. It encourages competition and ranking, not a necessary education opportunity for students to improve. They have simply stated that grades will give students encouragement and self-improvement and competition, but this is not true at all. Let's take a look at the leader of opposition's own words. She made a point that grades will encourage students to try to compete with each other, and she is correct. The students will be encouraged to compete against each other, but the students who are trying to show a deep understanding will be systematically ignored in the competitive system of the school. So this is the truth of the opposition's role. It simply tells them that they need to follow the standard method to receive good grades and reject an opportunity for this deep understanding if they do not want to get systematically excluded from the academic society. This will be especially harsh in countries with a highly competitive nature such as Korea or China. They have also tried to create a world where teachers are too busy or create a massive amount of workload for the teachers. But this argument in simple words is a lie. For example, let us think about the case of an essay grading. To give a letter grade, the teachers will have to mark every single grammar mistake, grade every single paragraph of the students, and give them a grade according to the rubric. But let's look at the case of written feedback. Instead of going through the tiring process of pointing out every single flaw, they can read the whole essay and give general feedback that can only be a paragraph long. Also, it also has to be taught that students will not just accept their grades like an obedient child. There will often be complaints and questions about why they received that grade, and teachers often have a mass amount of stress that they have to unfortunately suffer through. So the opposition's role will be the one that is actually overworking and stressing the teachers. The opposition also constantly stated that the point that grades have existed for centuries, but why does this mean that the grades are good? Grades have merely existed because nobody was able to step up and make a claim to overthrow them. The claim that something has existed for a long time so it is good does not have any credibility or evidence. So, Judge, consider a world where students are constantly receiving stress, lacking opportunities for deep understanding, and even teachers are receiving stress against our world. Therefore, the government wins this debate.